Life can come at you pretty quick and hard, so we should stick close to our ultimate authority. Jesus proves that he is the ultimate authority over everything. And here in Matthew chapter 8, as we continue on this series on discipleship, there's two instances here where Jesus calms a storm and he heals two demon-possessed men, proving that he has power over Satan himself, over evil spirits, as well as over nature itself. Matthew is writing this book quite diligently for us to be able to be good disciples. And he puts things together on purpose so that we can learn and understand and become better disciples, as well as to do his first goal, which is to recognize that Jesus is the Messiah. So as he continues on here, these are two other instances we see of Jesus doing healing. One is like kind of a supernatural healing where someone is sick and he makes them better. Another is here we have nature as another form to which God is showing that he has control over. And the next is over the evil spirits, over those who are healed via exorcism. And again, so Matthew throwing all three of these in. We talked about Jesus healing a bunch of people last week and the week before, and now we're getting on to different types of healings to show Jesus' authority over all. So as we get into first, we're going to break these sections up by a few verses of where Jesus calms the storm. He gets up and he rebukes the storm, and it stops immediately. And what is important in this too is that the next thing is when he runs into these evil spirits in these men, he rebukes them, he commands them to come out of them. So what is we're seeing here, and I want you to pick up on, is that when Jesus speaks, it is so. Just like we learned about the centurion 2 weeks ago, where he said, look, if you just say my servant's healed, he'll be healed. I tell this one to come and he comes because I'm a man under authority. And he goes on to explain what that authority is like. And he says, I know you've got that on you too, Jesus. And Jesus says, yes, he does. And he did heal from a distance. Then next we have here that Jesus just standing up and giving a command. And without really any effort, a storm subsides. And two demon-possessed men become healed with just a word. This is how authoritative Jesus really is. And this is what Matthew, who, by the way, we see becomes a disciple in the next couple weeks here, in the next chapter, as that he was a tax collector watching Jesus do all this stuff. He was probably a skeptic, which I think is really interesting. But then to see all this happening, he's like, nope, this guy, this is the real deal. I'm going to follow this Jesus Christ. So Matthew would have been hearing these stories by now and knowing of Jesus' fame and would have been familiar with some of his teaching by this point, but yet not a disciple. And so now, once he is a disciple, he writes this stuff down so that we can go along the same journey of faith that he did, and the same journey of understanding that Christ is the King, and understanding too that we can become fully devoted followers of Christ and become strong, and that we can partake of the benefit of Jesus' authority. It is once we know that Jesus is the authority, it's the best thing that we could ever do is to sneak up close to that, to walk with Christ. To walk anywhere else would mean to be walking outside of that blessing, which means you'd be living a weaker, less purposeful life. And so this is why I find it odd that oftentimes Christians are almost begging people to come follow Christ. And it's like, there's nothing better you can do. There's no other authority that you could go to have a more fulfilled, more empowering, and more protected life. It's just a common sense thing that the eternity that's bound up in our heart should go after God with all of our heart, with all our mind, and with all our strength. And when that doesn't happen, we really need to ask ourselves, why wouldn't I want that? So let's jump into these 4 verses from 23 to 27 and see what the Lord can speak to us today out of him calming the storm so many years ago. Then he got into the boat, and his disciples followed him. Suddenly a ferocious storm came up on the lake, so that the waves swept over the boat. But Jesus was sleeping. The disciples went and woke him, saying, Lord, save us, we're going to drown. He replied, You have little faith, why are you so afraid? Then he got up and he rebuked the wind and the waves, and it was completely calm. The men were amazed and asked, What kind of man is this? Even the winds and the waves obey him. Okay, so if we break down this verse by verse, let's see what we can observe in chapter 8, verse 23 to 27, is that it says that they got in the boat. This is right after the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus saying, cross over to the other side. This is a more Gentile region, although there could have been Jews there. It's probably understood that it was not Jews where they're going. But when they're out in the middle of the lake, a ferocious storm came up on them suddenly. They didn't expect it. Otherwise, guess what? They probably wouldn't have gone out in the boat in the first place and would have let it pass. But they didn't see it coming, and this is kind of what I was getting at. There's things in life that you won't see coming, and then all of a sudden, whammo, it's there, and they're like, well, now how do I deal with this? So the boats that the disciples would have used in that time period were big enough that you could cook on. It was meant so that you could do overnight expeditions on the Sea of Galilee, which is really just a really large lake, like 20 kilometers long. And but because it's still below sea level and it's in a valley, a rift valley, there at the Jordan Rift Valley, that you can have sudden changes in the weather, even though it's mostly temperate and mostly warm all year round. You can get major downdrafts coming off the mountains, just the way that the wind can hit, and just come upon the lake and put waves bigger than me on that lake, and it could easily swamp one of those boats. Now, those boats were designed to carry, a dozen people plus their cargo to be able to fish with nets at night, so the fish don't see the nets coming. And even so much, if somebody wasn't on shift, there was space in the back to which people, one or two people, could actually sleep. And so this is the case that we find with Jesus. Is he just finished church, as it were, got into the boat after talking with people afterwards, and then he wanted to have his Sunday afternoon nap. I don't know if it was a Sunday, but I was just putting you in the context. This storm comes up upon them. Jesus is obviously sound asleep, so it shows that it shows really this whole dichotomy that we talk about in the hypostatic union, which is that Jesus is 100% man and 100% God. He's not 50-50. And so in his human form, he was tired after doing ministry. But yet, as soon as he says that word, that command, that ultimate authority that is God comes out of his mouth and fixes everything. And so at this point, we have the disciples, the waves are starting to top the front of the boat, and they're getting worried about they're going to drown. And so they're probably thinking about abandoning ship. I don't know what, but they call upon Jesus and not even expecting him to do anything about it. But he's like, Lord, we're going to drown. There's a warning. Who knows what they're actually fully thinking? But nonetheless, we know what Jesus was thinking. He immediately gets up and he says, "Oh, you of little faith." He's really implying that they should have expected something greater than just to wake him up and to abandon ship or whatever else was on their thoughts. He thought that they should have already, with what they had seen, had a little more faith than they did. And so he just gets up and he rebukes the wave. By a simple command, the weather changes. This had not happened by anybody else in any great measure in the Old Testament. So these guys, why they said, "Who is this that even commands the wind and the waves?" In fact, it was only ever really described to rebuke the wind or the waves or water was by God, by one, rebuking the water after the world was flooded in Noah's day, and then God using Moses with the staff to rebuke the water, and then to which the Red Sea parted. Later, we'd see the Jordan River part, and later we would see the Jordan part again under Elisha, but most of that was with calling upon the name of the Lord to rebuke the water. But Jesus rebukes it in his own name, his own self, without calling upon the name of the Lord. He just does it, and the wind and the waves listen. This is why these guys got the faith lift that they were desperately needing. They were surprised that even this, it's like, wow, it's one thing that they would have seen traveling healers back in those days. There's accounts of healings, but there was never anything like this, who have control over nature. And there's very little effectiveness of anyone who would try to then go and help somebody who appeared to be demon possessed. But we'll get to that one in just a minute. So Jesus is not showing just an overall intensity and greater frequency of healings of the normal kind, but of also the control that no other prophet or no other healer was able to do ever. Another real takeaway for us is the question that he asks after he goes, "You have little faith." He says, "Why are you afraid?" Now, we can understand from their human point of view that a boat sinking in the middle of 10 miles out from land, how that could be a really concerning thing. But the way that Jesus asked it, he's basically saying, "Why are you afraid? I'm with you." It's like, yes, Jesus is acknowledging. By saying all that, he's saying, I can see the wind and the waves. I know that they're there, but so am I. And so that's something I think that we just don't quite get in our faith today, that we could really use a faith lift when it comes to that. Because you know what? There's things in this world that will come at us very hard and very quick, but we need to be sticking close to Jesus, who can take care of all of it. This is really important for us to understand that. So the next time you're surprised by something, the next time you set out on a journey that you thought was going to be good, and it just seems like Satan's throwing everything at you, or the world's throwing everything at you, and you can't handle it on your own strength, well, don't be afraid. That's the warning light for us to stop and to pray and to make sure that we have Jesus with us wherever we may go. And then he can calm the storms in our lives. And then we don't have to be afraid. You can handle anything that comes your way if you have Christ with you as you go. So once that ordeal is over, they end up on the shore on the other side of the lake, on the eastern flank of the Sea of Galilee. And immediately they're confronted by a couple demoniacs coming out from the tombs. And it's like, again, another sudden, violent thing happening. One was nature violently coming at them. Now we got two violent demon-possessed men coming after them that they did not foresee and they did not expect, But yet, nonetheless, by having Jesus with them, it didn't matter what suddenly came upon them. They made them scared because of the violence, whether it be of the wind or the person, that they had Christ there. And without very little effort, Jesus was able to take care of both of those situations. So why don't I read you the remaining verses of this and to see what we can learn on this here today. When he arrived on the other side of the region of the Gadarenes, two demon-possessed men, coming up from the tombs, they met him. They were so violent that no one could pass that way. "What do you want with us, Son of God?" they shouted. "Have you come here to torture us before the appointed time?" Some distance from them was a large herd of pigs that was feeding. The demons begged Jesus, "If you drive us out, send us into the herd of pigs." He said to them, "Go." So they came out and they went into the pigs, and the whole herd rushed down the steep bank into the lake, and they died in the water. Those tending the pigs ran off. He went into the town and reported all of this, including what had happened to the demon-possessed men. Then the whole town went out to meet Jesus, and when he saw him, they pleaded with him to leave their region. So we see they land on the shore. They're met by these two. Matthew indicates that there are two men, whereas Luke and Mark only indicate that there is one, likely talking about which one is actually the one talking to Jesus. And they say, hey, a blind man came and did this in one scenario, even though Matthew says there was two. And in this case, it's one demon-possessed man who was possessed by thousands of demons, as Luke and Mark attest to. And but Matthew is just saying there's two guys, and he didn't really specify which one was a spokesperson or anything like that when he's doing his narrative. We also learned that Mark kind of includes saying that the exorcism was to be not just out of those men, but out of the region and out of people just in general. This is what this command was. And so what I find interesting is that when they meet with Jesus, they recognize who he is instantly. So it's funny that Jesus just had a spell of disbelief amongst his own disciples when he asked them, "You have little faith," back during the storm. But yet when he arrives on shore, these evil spirits know exactly who Jesus is. And they don't resist, not even one little bit, like not even like a little bit. Do you think that even if somebody was like against God, that they would try to find some way out of there? But they were absolutely hopelessly attached to his commands, and they couldn't do anything about it except for to plead for their own life. What is interesting, he says, "Have you come here to torture us before the appointed time?" What is really interesting is that in first century, by then this point in time, they understood much of what we would, now know of demonology, as it were, is that there is evil spirits that are on the loose. There is a cohort of evil spirits who will exist in this world until the end. There are some that are currently chained, as we learn in the book of Revelation. There are some that are currently so it would seem that with the evil spirits, meaning the spirits that rebelled against Christ, he didn't remove them all, and they stay here to promote mischief and to promote what is wrong. And he's going to deal with all of them. And there's an understanding that Jesus can go and put someone in dungeons now, into chains, as we're told, and not wait until the very end. So they thought, are you bringing basically Judgment Day earlier? In fact, in the apocryphal book of First Enoch, we learn this. Now, we wouldn't consider that biblical text in the book of Enoch, but it still was nonetheless literature in the first century, and it brought an understanding of the Jewish history of the time. So it allowed us to at least get into their heads to know what they think. And that is compatible really with the rest of the Bible. And the reason why I brought that up is because it pretty much does condense kind of the whole thing, is that there are evil spirits. Some have been judged already, some their judgment awaits, but they're staying here until the great conclusion. I love that because it hasn't concluded yet. This story is not over yet. God wins, and he's going to carry us through. This is why often we say, that people say, why is there bad things happening in this world? It's like, well, it's humanity that botched God's perfect creation, and he is going to fix it once and for all, forever, but at the conclusion of things. He's allowing us to use our free will during this time of grace. And guess what? He has allowed evil spirits to use their will as well, and they chose to do evil, and they will be judged based upon what they have done. But nonetheless, they have remained here, the same as evil people remain in this world, and they act as a test. Jesus said there's going to be woe, things that are evil that people do in this world, but woe to those through whom they come. And so we know that as Satan and his demons work from behind the scenes, usually, mostly just to cause mischief and to cause problems, not to get any particular glory, because, well, truly Satan's vision is he wants more people away from God than possible. He has no greater joy than that. He doesn't need to be bowed down to worship. He just see that if people were thrown into hell along with him, that he would think that that was a job well done. That is his vision in life. Romans 12 and 13 teaches us that that's what he wants to do, is he can't get at God, so he goes after the ones that God loves. So all this begs the question, if evil spirits are in this world to cause mischief and trouble, and they possessed thousands of them, these two guys, then what can that mean for us here today? It's like, well, we do know that these evil spirits still exist in this world. Jesus did not throw them into the abyss ahead of time, to which is what they were pleaded against. I'll get to why they went into the pigs in just a moment. But nonetheless, we're told that evil spirits still do exist. This is why we're told not to do things of the occult, why we're told in the scriptures not to go after other gods or idolatry or using horoscopes or, all of the like, because we will not be channeling the one true God. And you might just end up catching a spirit, but it definitely will not be a Holy Spirit. And if that's the case, then, well, you've just invited evil into your life. You've invited a spirit from the pit of hell into your life. And we just simply don't want that for you. We're not trying to wag our finger at anybody of saying, don't do this and don't do that. It's like, you really don't want to hitch your cart with the devil or any of his evil spirits. You really don't. He might help you to make some of your personal goals get ahead, but his ultimate goal is to be like, I remember back in the 80s when they brought up the don't take candy from a stranger, because that's what they used to use on kids to get them into the van, and then it was all over. And Satan is very happy to use that same tactic in any disguise or spiritist way or whatever way. It might even seem very unspiritual, the things that he can lead us to. And we're told, so that's what we call giving Satan a foothold. When we consciously sin, when we know we're doing wrong in the face of what God has asked us to do, then in ways we are inviting Satan to walk along with us. In the same way, when we walk with Jesus, we're going to do holy things. If we're going to be walking with the devil, as it were, we're going to be doing unholy things. And we just simply don't want to invite Satan into our lives. We're told in the New Testament 2 different times of how to get Satan to repel from us. Draw near to the Lord, and Satan will flee from you. And that's basically it. A repetition over. Get close to Christ, and then God will look after the rest. Satan cannot deal with Jesus. We learn that right here. Even when they're confronted, it's like, oh no, this is the end. And what ends up happening is Jesus is just so authoritative. He's just so holy that it just shines them out of the area, and they just want to get lost. And so, in the same way, if we draw near to the Lord, Satan will flee from us. And so this is why we should not walk in ways that are wicked. Their indications say this is also that when we say this is what a sin is in the Bible, we're also warning, saying this is the path, a pathway that leads to Satan and have him have control over your life. See, Jesus came to set us free. Satan wants to bind us and to make us slaves to fear and to him in many ways. So to find out that this person, if we can welcome Satan into our lives, and we welcome him to have influence over us. In this case, it became quite a predicament for these two people. And so it suggests that there's varying quantities of evil spirits that can have influence on your life. And this and a few other places depict similar things. The fact that thousands of pigs were killed is remarkable to see that they had to come out of that man. They had to go somewhere. So it also shows us that evil spirits really can't do anything unless they have a host. They're essentially a virus. They need a host in order to be able to do their thing. They just don't necessarily float out there, and they don't do that well. We're told that even by Jesus, where he says that, if a demon is cast out of a man, he goes through arid places and is trying to find rest but finds none, and then goes back and tries to get back into his old house and brings 7 more wicked spirits than himself to go into that person. So Satan does not just like to live in the spiritual realm. He wants to get in and on somebody and some things. And here we learn that animals can be possessed. And this is interesting. So it used to be that long ago, everybody thought that every kind of mental illness must have been some sort of demon. Now we've kind of flipped to thinking that the culture says there's no such thing as evil spirits possessing somebody. And it's like, well, I think there's 2 things that could be going on at play, when it comes to how we are tormented in our soul. And some of it, yes, could be just straight out mental illness that we can go and get help from medication or a doctor. And others, we do need to be praying and saying, hey, is this torture that's tormenting my soul? Is this not my health? Is it not my mental health or my physical health? Is it my spiritual health? And well, the answer to that is I don't know what it may be, but I do know one thing: if it is spiritual health, it will go away at the command of the Lord. It will obey without hesitation the name of Jesus Christ. And so this is why we want to pray and say, Lord, forgive me for the sins I've done. Forgive me for the things that I have done that has cooperated with the kingdom of hell, and protect me from the evil one. And it will work if that is what is the root cause. So we don't like to alarm people over things like that, because I know when you start teaching on evil spirits, people can get really weirded out. People might even have an active imagination when it comes to those things. But nonetheless, Jesus teaches us that evil spirits are real. They're in this world. They like to have a host, and they like to cause as much mischief and uncleanliness as possible. So if we know that that's what their vision in life is, that we can pray about every situation and our own spiritual health. And it might help us to understand why some people act the way that we do. You might be actually seeing like, why are other people acting weird towards me? Well, if other people have allowed Satan into their lives by agreeing with his plan of morality and his vision for life, then you're going to rub them the wrong way. Just because you're carrying the spirit of Jesus, if they're carrying the spirit of hell, then they're going to collide and there's going to be quite a reaction. And so don't worry about that. Jesus has told us to expect that. But nonetheless, we don't want to judge anyone who's that. We want to help set them free. Jesus just didn't go, hey, look at the reaction. These guys are demon possessed. They're evil. And then he walked along his merry way. No, he healed them. He set them free. So let's be a healer to the nations. Let's be a healer to everybody that we encounter, and to pray that the Lord would uh, be the one in their heart and that they wouldn't yield to another. And so now let's ask, why the pigs? What are the pigs for? Well, the long answer is, or I should say the short answer is, we don't know conclusively based upon what Scripture says. But there's some things that we can kind of infer what we do know. One, we do know they're called unclean spirits. And we do know that pigs are about the most unclean animal that you could have. And if you were a Jew raising those, you'd be considered unclean Jews. The tombs to which these men were in were, if you touched a dead body, you were considered unclean until you were made clean. And so if they were to leave these unclean men, that would be the next unclean thing that they could go into. So quite a match. If their idea is also for destruction and mischief, while taking out a whole herd of thousands, that would have been caused an economic recession in that area for quite some time. And nobody really quite knows exactly if they were Jews or Gentiles. It was a Gentile region, but there's so much mixing going on that you can't tell by this text who these farmers were, who these villagers were. But the more likely of the two is that they were, in fact, not Jews. And so what is interesting is this is a sign to the Gentiles, the non-Jews, and yet they rejected him. We're so often talking about how it was the Jews who rejected Jesus and the non-Jews that received him. But here in this case, if they in fact are Gentiles, that they wanted Jesus to just go away. He caused a massive uproar. He caused a worry, and Jesus brought a healing, and he brought them, hey guys, look, there's freedom here. And they didn't appear to want it. Either they were too scared and thought that judgment was going to come upon them, or they just mocked at it, wanted to continue doing their own ways. We don't know exactly their motive, but they begged him to go away because this was just too much for them to handle. Again, 2,000 swine. That would have been like knocking out an entire farm in a town anywhere in Canada here. And so it would have been a very large deal. Would have also been pretty gross what it would have done to the water afterwards. But it would seem that these spirits love a host. They picked one numerous enough for them all to go into, and then they went and they died in there. And it's like maybe they're then looking for a greater host, because it does appear that Jesus, the way that he says it, was to come out of these men and to no longer go into men. So it's not like they could go into the town and go possess other people, because Jesus forbade that from the whole region, is what Mark says. And so for them to do so, it's like, we'll go down the coast here a little bit, see those pigs, and then once their spirits are released from the dead pigs, then they would go to wherever that may be, roaming to and fro, as we're told, until they can find more mischief in another new host. Because there's really not a lot you could do if you were in a pig. If you had to leave the men and go somewhere, and those are the only things around, and you can cause trouble for Jesus, well, then that's probably what you would try to do pretty quick, and then go look for something else. And so with these two instances of the demon-possessed men being healed and with the calming of the seas, we see that Jesus is very benevolent to everybody he is encountering. We see that he can rebuke and correct and bring commands that are answered that nobody can resist. The weather can't, and not even can evil spirits. So I'd like to encourage you today, if this is what Jesus can do in the lives, and he wants to improve everybody's life around them, and he wants everything to be good and holy in people's lives, then we should really want to resist the devil, and then draw near to the Lord and his ways, recognize that the sins that are put out in front of us are meant to get us off of God's road, to trick us into getting in, letting Satan have a foothold in our lives. We do not want to have any more negative influence in our lives than there already is. Life itself is pretty tough in this broken world that we created. And so I don't want to agree with Satan anymore, and I hope that you don't either. And so this is a great inspiration for us to be able to draw near to the Lord. Let Satan flee from us. We draw near to the Lord, not just for the benefit of the protection and the power and the authority, because it is what is right and is what will give us rest for our souls. and we won't need to worry about the torment that comes our way. And that no matter what you may face, no matter how quick it may come upon you, that we can call upon the name of the Lord, and that's why we can walk through the valley of the shadow of death and fear no evil, for God is with us. Well, thank you for tuning into church today. God bless you. Have a great day.
Let's do something together. Life is better in community. So let me encourage you to reach out to us via the Connect card that you'll see in the description at the bottom of this video. That's your opportunity to just say hi. Let us know you're watching. Let us know how we can be praying for you. Or maybe you have some questions about faith, about our church, or about life in general. We're here to help you, and we're happy to do so. I'd also like to thank those who are faithfully giving. I can't express my thanks enough. We're able to continue ministry in our community and abroad so wonderfully because of your faithfulness of giving the Lord's tithes and your offerings. So to go above and beyond his tithes is just incredible. And so for those of you who want to come and visit us, please know that our service is a gift to you. We never ask for anything from our guests. As a Christian, it is my act of worship to give to the Lord, and each one of us Christians believe that. So if you want to come check us out, there's no pressure. Just come on over. If you did want to give, we have simple ways. Give at regalchurch.com for your e-transfer, no password required. You can drop it in the offering plate on Sundays, or you can drop to the office through the week. Just pop in, say hello, and let us know who you are, and we'd be happy to chat with you. We can also set up automatic deposit. We'll just send you the simple form, and you fill it out and send it back, and it's good to go. So thanks for your time, and God bless you. Thank you.